Hello and welcome back to the Collective Clicks podcast. This is your host, Brandon Bateman. And today I'm going to be joined by our Director of Paid Media, Garrett Cragen, and we're going to talk all about bid strategies. How are you doing today, Garrett?
Good. How are you?
Hey, doing fantastic. Thank you. Excited for another podcast. This is number 5 out of 7 on our series of what do we call them?
The PPC essentials.
Yeah, PPC essentials. Yeah, the 7 PPC essentials that make campaigns
Bread
work.
and butter.
That's right. So super excited for this, as he is my number one passion, my favorite channel. And so much of that comes down to bid strategies and auctions and how all that works. So that's what we're talking about today, bid strategies. And if you don't know what that is, then don't worry about it. We're going to talk all about that and how it works. But I think before we dive fully into that, we have to understand, why are bid strategies even important and what are they? Because we've been in this changing world. If you think of advertising a long time ago, then what did you do? You buy like a billboard, and that billboard's in this place, and then comes TV, and then TV ads run on this certain channel, and whoever's watching that channel, get that person. But then things have changed over time to where now, like, you open up Facebook, for example, and you see one ad, I see a different ad. Because it's not like there's just an ad that's on Facebook, right? And a lot of this has Google kind of pioneered a long time ago. So I think a great way to start, Garrett, would be if you could jump into the foundation of this, which is the Google Ads auction and what exactly is happening there. Why does it matter? Just so we can set the stage for what bid strategies are and why they matter too.
Yeah, for sure. This can get pretty in the weeds, and so I'll try to keep it as high level as possible, just so people don't get bored. But it basically comes down to, every time a person makes a search on Google, it fires like an instant auction where everyone, like all of the advertisers, rush to the auction and they give their bid and say, this is how much I'll pay to appear on this person's search. And Google takes into account the bid and also the experience that your ad and landing page gives to the user. And it takes those two data points, merges them, and then picks the best combination of bid and experience and gives that person, makes them the auction winner. And the reason why they take into account the experience is because they want people to get relevant and easy to understand information that answers their question. So if you give your searchers what they're looking for and it's relevant and people seem to get what they're looking for, then going forward, Google is going to reward you with auction wins at a lower bid than someone that gives a bad experience and it might bid higher than you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really comes down to, have you ever had that experience where you click on an ad and then what you get on the other side is not at all what you were expecting to get?
All the
So then you
time.
click back. And when you do that, if that just always happens when you use Google, then you're not going to really use Google anymore, right? Or at least you're not going to click on the paid ads. I think some of us have already been conditioned to do that, right? Not on paid ads very much anymore because
I
they're
always do, just to get those paid ads, people.
just to, yeah, just lower their conversion rates just
That's
one
right.
one more bit. And I'll read them and stuff. Like I can pick out something that'll have a good experience behind it from something that won't based on the ad copy. But the point is, Google wants people to click on paid ads forever and always be getting the information they need there. So,
Yeah.
but as it relates to quality, we're not going to touch on that too much today, just because all this other stuff that we talked about, like basically all of the other pillars, relate really heavily to the ad quality, to the quality score is the technical term, or more simply, as you said it, the experience that you provide someone. So really that's just about making your landing page relevant, like we talked about, and making the ad copywriting good and targeting the right keywords. If you do all that stuff, then your quality score shouldn't be bad. But then the bids, how do you know what bid to put into the auction and all that kind of stuff is a tough thing to figure out. And it really comes down to bids. I think a foundation for this is just understanding some of the different bid strategies that exist and what they base their information on. And then from there, we could talk more in depth about when might it be more appropriate to use one bid strategy or another. But could you give an overview of like different ways that you can go about bidding?
Yes. So this is kind of like a history of Google episode, but when Google first started, all bidding was basically only dictated by the search being made. So like, and let's say in our industry, if someone searches sell house fast near me, I bid this. If someone searches companies that buy houses, I bid this. And that was based on a bidding approach called manual CPC, right? And so it was just purely, I think that this keyword gives me this quality, and so I can bid here and still see a profit. But over time, Google has rolled out what they call automated bidding, and that takes into account all of the thousands of data points that Google has on each person. And when we use an automated bidding approach in our account, we not only factor in the search, but the searcher and what they have, like who they are, what they've been searching, and we have Google take that into account as it sets bids for us. And so those are kind of the two categories of bidding strategy is there's manual that only looks at the search, there's automated that looks at the search and the searcher.
And just basically a lot more information because they even roll down manual, like some stuff, right?
Mhm.
Where you could target based on actually in this industry, practically nothing because of all the
Mhm.
because of all the equal opportunity housing
In housing,
regulations.
yeah.
I think there's some things that you can do it based on though. Like you could change your bid by device or by household income, but it's so limited compared to the tens of thousands of data points that Google has that if they were to publish would probably scare everybody into never using Google again.
Yeah.
But we have on good authority that there's a lot of stuff there. Things like income data, demographic data that could be tied to someone's online history. Like maybe they just searched sell my house in Google now, but 2 days ago they searched we buy houses. That tells you something about what it could mean when they're searching for sell my house right now, what websites they visit. If you just knew everybody in the world's internet browsing history, you would know a lot about those people. And Google knows that. Add on to that they can connect that to like third-party data providers that have, for example, credit card data and what kind of things are people purchasing. And all of this stuff, it really helps you understand because what's most predictive of future behavior? It's past behavior.
Mm.
If you have a lot of the data about that past behavior, you can relatively simply predict the future behavior of somebody. So there's kind of holy war is the right word around bidding strategies, specifically automated versus manual. And I'll brief kind of the high level. I'm curious to hear your specific thoughts on it.
Yeah.
People who are hardcore manual basically are like have this idea that like automated bidding is giving the reins to Google. You can't trust Google. They just want your money. And I know better than Google. It's like the consensus there. And automated bidding is lazy. People that are really pro automated bidding might reference a lot of this data that could be used. They might reference better results. They might have different circumstances that they've worked on in different accounts that have caused them to like automated bidding. And this has been like a shifting game. I think everybody agrees pretty much that automated bidding is a lot better now than it's ever been before. It's been on that growth trajectory over the past several years, but still many people fall on either side. What's your opinion on which bid strategy is best or which category of bid strategies?
If we're speaking to like just this industry, just REI, there's I think one of the hardest parts of PPC in the industry is that there's not a lot of conversion volume and there aren't a lot of clicks in a given time period, given the cost per click and the cost per lead that's common in the industry. And so, given that manual is going to work better on low data volume accounts and worse as there's higher data volume, what I would argue is that if a, if an account is only operating on its own data and it doesn't have a huge budget, I think it makes sense to run on manual. Like, I think there's a point where you probably know more about your audience than Google does if you're getting 4 or 5 leads a month, right? Or even beyond that, like, I still think that you probably know more than Google given that data size. But as there's higher spend and higher volume in an account, that balance shifts towards being uh, in favor of automated because as Google has better volume, more data points that it can see like who your ideal audience is, then all of a sudden it can better make that like ideal searcher that best like response to your ads. So I think that kind of ties into what we do and what makes us like different from doing it yourself or doing it with a different vendor is we bring you the benefit of having huge amounts of volume without having to spend that money yourself. So we bring you the benefits automated bidding to your account without having the limitations of not having a ton of volume in your current account. Do you want to like cover what I missed in that? But I think
Mhm.
that's helpful to just highlight here.
No, I think you're totally right on that. And I think it's supported by just looking at who supports manual versus automated bidding. If you find a lot of people that are into manual bidding still, you'll notice that they generally work with really small budgets and low conversion volumes. The higher the budget that someone's managing gets, the harder it is to find someone that's still doing it manually.
Yeah.
And that's where once you break that 100,000 a month barrier, it seems like it's really hard to find people. I've never heard of any company that spends more than $1 million a month on ads ever doing manual bidding.
No.
Not because it's like harder. In some ways, it's easier with that amount of volume, but because Google just gets smarter than you. You have to think when you're doing manual bidding, you're just doing math and
Uh-huh.
statistics. And computers are better at that than you are, believe it or not.
Shockingly. Yeah.
Yes. And so you can't be all egotistical, just thinking we're going to be smarter than this all-knowing machine
Yeah.
that
Totally.
has a lot of information. But I totally agree with you. And I think we should dig a lot more into how exactly we're executing conversion volume that you're talking about in the best category here. A little bit of a reminder, if somebody hasn't seen the other PPC Essentials videos that we've done, we'll generally dive into what are people doing wrong? How do you do it well? And then how do you do it very well? And each of them has its own share of things that come with it. So that considered, let's talk about some things that where do we see people going wrong with bid strategies? We see a lot of accounts, some people really successful and others really unsuccessful. What are some things that you've noticed people are doing consistently that's just not working when it comes to bid strategies?
I think the biggest common flaw I see is people just aren't testing. They like find one bidding like approach that they use, and
Right.
they aren't seeing awesome results, or they're seeing fine results, but they aren't pulling that lever of seeing if they can beat that output with a different bidding tactic. And so I think that's like easy way to lose money is to not test that out, because what worked historically isn't always going to be your best performer. So it's important to always be just trying new things and seeing how you can take your account to that next level.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's advice that works today and 10 years from now, right?
Yep.
Because we can talk about some different things that we've seen and why certain strategies are working better than others in some circumstances. But that's like today's data today, right? You always have to be on top of things. Can I add one to that? I've seen some people testing bid strategies, but they don't know how to test bid strategies. Because what a lot of people don't know is if you just have one campaign with one bid strategy and another campaign with another bid strategy, that's not actually a test. A lot of people would say it is because the only difference between those campaigns is the bid strategy. So therefore, you have isolated a variable, and then you have your control and your experiment, and you can see how they perform. But why is that not true?
Because those aren't necessarily targeting the same audience. So like just because they're the same keywords, just because they're the same settings, doesn't mean that you're doing an exact split of your traffic where they each only get one of those campaigns or those settings. So when you're doing a test, the the only way to have that actually be like a true A/B test is to make an experiment in Google Ads where you split your traffic in different segments and say, I only want each group to get one of these variables and not both. That way it's clear that the only variable is not the audience itself, but it's just that campaign, and it helps to isolate anything else where maybe someone saw both, but they only like responded to one because it came at a different time of the day and they just liked it better, you know.
One to make one thing really clear here, when you use the word experiment, you're not using the word experiment like a lot of people think. Like you're specifically referring to a particular feature
Feature.
within Google Ads called the drafts and experiments feature. And when you use that feature, basically every time someone searches on Google, half the time it pretends that campaign number one is the only campaign that exists. And then the other half of the time, or you can set if it's half or a third or whatever you want it to be,
Yeah.
it pretends that campaign number two is the only campaign that exists. And what happens if you don't do that is campaign one and campaign two are both eligible for that search. So, but Google from your account is only going to put one bid into the auction. So it's going to have to choose between those. And I don't know if there's like formal documentation on how it does it. I understand that generally just takes, if the way that campaign one is bidding, it ends up with a bid of $10 and campaign two ends up with a bid of $50, it's probably just going to take campaign two and put that bid into the auction.
Yep.
So you basically just always, like whichever campaign's willing to pay the most for a certain click, it's the campaign that gets that particular click. And yeah, it's not an even split. So definitely testing bid strategies with campaign drafts and experiments. The other thing is you got to get that way more data than people think. I see so many people ending bid strategy tests so early. It's
8 versus 5 winner. you know?
Yes, it's like the exception, not the rule. Like I swear, like more than 95% of the time, people are ending those tests before they actually have statistically significant data, which I hope I don't have to explain is really important to do, that you have statistically relevant sample size. Otherwise, you're just, I flipped this coin 3 times and I got 3 heads, and this other one, I got 2 heads and 1 tail. So this coin's better.
Yeah.
And it's definitely flawed. The other thing we put in the bad section here is that sometimes bid strategies are really good, but they're not good at a certain point in the campaign. A classic example of this is some bid strategies are very conversion focused, but sometimes using those same bid strategies at the beginning of a campaign, you can get bad results with them when later on you might get much better results. Expand on that.
Yeah, so if like, there's one bidding tactic called maximize conversions. And basically how that works is we say, Google, I want you to find me as many conversions as I can given my fixed budget. And it's going to do its best to find what searches take the action that we define as a conversion. And the issue when an account doesn't have much data is it has no idea what kind of person or search converts, and it's just going to blow your budget as fast as it can learning.
It's the only time you'll ever find a $400 click.
Yeah.
Maximize conversions on day one.
Be like, let's do this. Let's spend this budget. Let's learn. So if there was a alternate name for this bidding tactic, in my mind, it's maximize spend, because it's going to spend the hell out of your budget. And so it's all about knowing how they work, knowing their weaknesses, and knowing what they're prone to do. And so if you have like plenty of data historically in your account, then it does great. But it's not great as a first step because it doesn't have any historical data to like inform its actions. It's just blind.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That is fantastically explained. So let's talk about some ways that people can do this well, right? If we're talking like best practice, generally accepted truths about good ways to do bidding and that kind of thing. I think number one, we just went over, it's making it conversion focused, but with time. Generally, a best practice is you want your bid strategies to be focused on whatever your end goal is, which is going to be
Correct.
to get conversions. And ultimately, it's even to get deals.
Revenue. Yeah.
Yeah. So you want to make sure that you align it as closely as you possibly can with that. Granted, if you just report revenue as conversions only, then this beginning phase that you just talked about, where the bid strategy goes crazy because it doesn't know what to do, that would last like 10 years
Yeah.
for a lot of people with the amount of volume that they have, right? So you have to be like, there's a balance there. So within this concept of aligning a bid strategy with your goals, though, I think it'd be awesome for us to talk about what bid strategies we do recommend that we're commonly using and under what circumstances we tend to use those bid strategies.
Yeah, so I would say there are 3 bidding strategies that we use the most. There's 2 that we use very frequently and then 1 that we use less frequently, but the 2 that we use the most are very much optimized for conversions, and that's going to be maximize conversions is the first, and the other one is target cost per acquisition, or target CPA as it's called. And both of those kinds of are 2 sides of the same coin of having Google optimize for getting the most bang for your buck from your budget with the end goal of leads. The difference is with maximize conversions doesn't optimize for efficiency, it just pushes for volume. So it's going to push to spend your budget first and worry about the cost per lead second. And then the other one, target CPA, is going like, basically we say, here's our goal cost per lead that we want. Get me as many in this range as possible, or don't spend the budget. If this can't be hit, then just don't spend, because I have to have this be like, things are either here or I don't spend at all. And so those are the 2 most commonly used tactics in our account. And then the third that we've been very bullish on that we're still learning is maximize value, where we give different leads a different value, and we have Google optimize for maximizing the value that our leads drive. That's a little bit deeper into the weeds, but that one that we're very bullish on boosting our lead quality and giving Google even better data points to work towards.
Let's first talk about max conversions versus target CPA, because I think those will be most relevant to people. And then we can talk about maybe our vision for the value-based bidding,
for sure.
which is, I think, the future, but also like really complicated. Don't want to dig into it too much. When it comes to maximize conversions versus target CPA, I think the way I think about it is like max conversions is like a fully automated bid strategy. You don't really have control over anything. Target CPA is like largely automated, but you still have control over some things. So you have more parameters that you can possibly control. And that means that target CPA, a lot of it depends on the skill with which you use that strategy. It ends up performing versus max conversions doesn't really require any skill outside of just the proper conversion tracking and that sort of thing for it to continually operate. Because target CPA, for example, if you just set a target CPA of $1 million, then you might end up with $1 million cost per lead. You got to do to improve your results is lower that. But if you put it too low, then you end up underspending on your budget. So that's one thing that I think is important to make a distinction on. Maximize conversions. Let's just say, like, this is an oversimplification, but let's just say it's the end of the day and you haven't spent your budget. Max conversions is going to put in bids really high to try to win clicks so that it can spend your full budget. Target CPA would say, well, our target CPA is $100 and there's a 10% chance that click's going to convert, in its opinion, based on all the data that it has. So it wouldn't bid more than $10, even if it's under budget. So our clients with target CPA, the way we manage it is we always just try to put the target CPAs as low as we can without going under budget. Although sometimes you do. And then sometimes they're too high and you have a too high of a cost per lead, right? So if you put the target CPA really high, you're going to end up paying a higher cost per lead than you could. If you put it really low, then you're going to end up paying a lower cost per lead, but you're not going to get all the volume you want. And it's a constant game trying to chase that and get those bids right. And it's something that can be frustrating for our clients because it's not uncommon that you end the month and you spent 75% of your budget, for example, instead of 100% like you would spend with max conversions. But maybe some of that was more wasted and you end up with a higher cost per lead.
Yeah.
I know you also recently did an analysis. We've been doing a lot of split testing between max conversions and target CPA, seeing which accounts are doing better with different bid strategies. And I know that you've seen some data recently as to which accounts that we have are doing better with one or the other. Do you want to share that?
Yeah, so what we saw is that as the volume of or as the budget and the number of leads increased, maximized conversions began to outperform target CPA. But like in the if budget is a like bell curve, right, with the like median being the most common, and in that most common budget range, our best performer was target CPA from a cost per qualified lead perspective. But as spend went up, we did see that shift over towards maximized conversions because it had more data points to like find ways to hit that volume and spend that whole budget. But most commonly, our best performer was target CPA for most of our clients.
So target CPA is definitely our go-to. I can tell you, knowing some of the clients that are running max conversions really successfully, some things they tend to have in common. They're really widespread geographically, which I think correlates really heavily with the lead volumes and the budgets. Our clients that are national tend to have larger budgets than our clients that are more local.
Yeah.
And big budget, of course. But our clients that have the most leads, they tend to be really widespread geographically and they tend to have large budgets, and therefore the max conversions seems to work better in those circumstances. And then one other one that I want to dig into is specific to a certain type of campaign. It's a target impression share. I guess to lay the foundation for what that is, impression share is basically what percentage of the time do you show up on Google. And when someone searches for one of your keywords in your locations with all your targeting parameters and all that kind of stuff. So a target impression share strategy, the way that works is you set a target impression share that you want to hit, be that 80%, 90%, 100%, whatever the case is. And then what Google's going to do is it's just going to bid whatever is required in order to hit that. So let's just say your target impression share is 100%. Its goal is just to bid a penny more than everybody else on every auction because they want you to show up every single time. Versus if it was lower, then they look for what are the cheaper options. How do you feel about that bid strategy, and when do you think it's appropriate?
If the goal of the campaign is to get as many leads for as efficient as possible, I would not use that, with the exclusion of that rule being if the campaign is a branded campaign. And what I mean by that is if that campaign is targeting your company name or key terms that reflect your brand, like your CEO's name or those kinds of things that are very like brand specific, then in that case it does make sense to want to maximize your ownership of that traffic because that's people looking for you directly. And so taking the steps to ensure that you maximize how often you appear for people looking for your own name, that makes a lot of sense. But that's pretty much the only time I would use that because it can get really expensive and really inefficient because it's not optimizing for the right people doing the search. It's just looking for, I want everyone to always see my ad regardless of their behavior, their demographics, their location, anything. Just hit me with everyone. I want to maximize my air coverage.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And that's where we've seen the most success with it is in branded campaigns. Now, if you think about a branded campaign, they tend to be pretty cheap. The reason being the brand doesn't have a ton of volume. And then you layer on top of that, that it's less competitive. And then you layer on top of that, that when we talked about quality score being a component that matters, you're going to have a better quality score on your brand than anybody else can because you're the most relevant and authoritative to your own brand. Anybody who's someone searching for you and then they try to shove themselves in there,
Yeah.
they're not going to get the same click-through rate that you're going to get. And they're not going to get the same landing page experience that you're going to get because they aren't you and someone's looking for you. So like you by definition are the most relevant thing.
Yeah.
So you kind of have an advantage compared to your competition. What I love about this target impression share strategy that you won't get with like max conversions or something for your brand is it will only spend what's necessary. So let's just say you have a branded campaign and you put the target at 100% absolute top impression share. So you just want to completely cover your brand. And then you put a $10,000 a month budget on it. It's just going to, every time someone searches for your brand, it's going to bid a penny more than what the next person was willing to bid, adjusted to the quality scores. And if you can pull that off for $200 a month, then it's going to cost you $200 a month. If it takes $5,000, it'll take you $5,000. If it takes $11,000, then you'll end up being capped by your budget of $10,000. But my experience is for most brands, it tends to be really low. The exception being sometimes brands that are very generic. If your brand name is Sell My House Fast, then you're going to be
Yeah.
battling an uphill battle there on that
Yeah.
brand versus if you're like something completely unique that nobody would be bidding on accidentally, not meaning to target your brand. So definitely I would say consider that for anybody. I usually wouldn't go to this strategy unless someone has a lot of branded search volume. I think that's the case for a lot of people doing a lot of TV ads, radio ads, maybe like very high volume direct mail. Although TV and radio are the ones that are famous for generating a ton of branded traffic because maybe 25% of your leads will come through people finding your website. And you want to cover that. So if anybody's listening to this and you have a lot of branded traffic through any of those methods and you're not running PPC, it's probably true that when someone looks for you on Google, they have to scroll a far way to find you. And you're probably losing some of that traffic. So a strategy like this, where you just kind of have the goal and then you accomplish it for the least money possible, I think makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And I would just add that if you do have a lot of brand traffic and aren't running ads PPC, it's likely that other brands in your space that are active on PPC are probably bidding on your brand term because they know that it has high volume. And so if they're there and you're not, then they're poaching that traffic that you've spent time and money building. So it's important to like own that real estate because if you aren't, then somebody else is.
Almost always, there's
Yeah.
going to be 4 ads at the top of Google for any of these terms. The thing with so many company names in this industry is you don't even have to try to target someone to accidentally target them, right? If your company name is Utah Home Buyers,
Yeah.
then everybody's bidding on you and they're not even trying to bid on you, trying to find other cold traffic.
Yeah.
Versus if you have a really unique company name, then it's still probably a problem, especially if people know you, but it's not as competitive as,
Less so. Yeah.
yeah. All right, let's talk about how you completely crush everybody else when it comes to bid strategies. And I'm super excited to share this. I think there's this misconception. People in this industry and in Google Ads in general kind of believe that companies that spend the most money with Google have the best results. And I think that's generally true, but it's true for the wrong reason. A lot of people think the people who spend the most money get the best results because Google favors them. And it's like when you're buying from a TV channel and you're buying ad space, and if you buy way, way more, then they'll give you a cheaper price on the ad space. Really, that's not how it works with Google at all.
Yeah.
Google's actually going to charge you more the more you want to get because you have to bid more aggressively in order to get that amount of inventory. Yet bigger advertisers still tend to do better. And the reason is not that Google likes them more. It's that Google's bid strategies, they're learning from your data, and the companies that spend the most money have the most data. So therefore their bid strategies get the smartest. That's why high volume companies actually do the best. So this strategy, you spoke a little bit about it before. Let's talk about what exactly this is, how other people think that they're doing that, but they're not actually. The technical term here is this is called a portfolio level cross-account bid strategy. And I know it's a mouthful, but instead of bidding in a specific campaign, like this is my bid strategy, you actually have a portfolio bid strategy. And that can go across different accounts. In Google, there's 2 different places in a structure. You have a parent account and you have a child account. And we have a parent account and we have a bunch of child accounts under that parent account. And all those child accounts can basically utilize the same strategy that's held on our parent account. Can you explain a little bit more about how that works or the benefit of that?
Yeah, so if we think about how a bidding strategy does better the more data it has, how this works, this shared bidding we use, is all of our accounts under a parent account share learnings across each other. And so they're able to get the benefit of huge volume of spend, of clicks, of conversions without having to actually have put that investment into their ads themselves. I like to call it I call it an other people's money type of thing, where you can, in a a rough way, spend other people's money to make your campaigns better. Um, and so we can take all of that data, hundreds of thousands of leads across our clients, and push those learnings into your account, because all of our clients have a similar, like, audience. They use a similar keywords, right? And so because there's that much shared information, it works to have them all use the same bidding strategy, and it brings huge wins by bringing the benefit of automated bidding without having to push the spend and the budget that is usually required to have that kind of efficiency.
And there are two really common objections to this. I want to answer one of them myself. I'll give you the other one.
Cool.
The first objection is that my market's different, right? So you guys have all this data from all across the United States, but people in Salt Lake City, Utah are different from people in Tampa, Florida. So why would I use Tampa, Florida's data to fuel my strategy in Salt Lake City, Utah?
I would argue that we have clients in just about every market,
Fair.
including Salt Lake City. So odds are very high that we actually do have a best match for your market, first of all. But I also would argue that Google knows that those areas do behave differently, and it's going to be able to still find the shared attributes of that audience, even if that they live in different parts of the country. They still have a lot of shared attributes as far as their income, their work history, their search history. Those things are much more impactful to their behavior than the part of the country they live in. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, of like, what most matters is what is available and what's being used by Google in its bidding. So I don't think that's a huge concern at all.
Yeah. Everybody thinks their market is a snowflake, right?
Yeah.
And they are, but people are more similar than they are different, right? Um, because a lot of this data comes down to, if someone searches for this particular term, are they more or less likely to convert than someone who searches this other term? And it's going to be consistent. The other thing that people don't realize is that this algorithm that's doing this, it actually has segmentation by location built into it. So that's one of the features that it predicts on. And then it learns based on how successful it is in those things. So basically anything you could think about, oh, what if it didn't know this? It's learning if it does or doesn't know that thing, and then it's getting better at optimizing towards that thing. And I know that's confusing, but you could think of it like, it's like your stereotypical, like, large irrelevant data compared to niche but low sample size data, where it has a little bit of data in Salt Lake City that says this is what happens. And then it has a ton of data that's not from Salt Lake City that says that's what happens. And it uses a mesh between those to predict what's going to happen. Again, more data, gets smarter and smarter about predicting those things.
Yeah.
Basically what you said, I just said it with different words.
Yeah.
But the second objection here is everybody does that, right? They say, oh, this is what I heard from every marketing agency that I talked to. They have all this data from all their clients and they use that for all their other clients. So I want to be very clear that we're not, kind of like when you mentioned that you can do an experiment before. And the word experiment can mean different things. We're talking about a very specific feature set, because there's a huge difference between two camps of analytics. There's predictive analytics and there's inferential analytics. Inferential is the concept of, I'm going to look at how A performs compared to B. I'm going to learn something, and then according to what I learn, I'm going to apply different things, right? But the whole, like, there's an actual data generation process. There's a real way that the world works, and we're trying to build models to understand how that world works. And inferential data analysis is like me saying, this worked for this client in this market, and therefore I'm going to do that same thing for this other client in this similar market, or something like that. But at the end of the day, it's like the whole goal of the data collection is to understand. Versus predictive analytics, that's all about increased accuracy, but less understanding of how that data is generated. And I apologize if that's a little bit too confusing, but basically, like, machine learning, AI, all of that is all based on predictive analytics, because they're so much more powerful than inferential analytics. It's not like you can build like statistical models based on it, as well as it's like iteratively learning what actually is most successful. So why that matters is I can know a lot about what worked in your market previously, and then I can apply that. But that's way, way different than the bid strategy actually inside of itself having data from previous positive results in your market. So there's this cool thing that you can do. If you just click on the bid strategy in Google, you can see what data is fueling it. It'll say it got this many conversions, this much spend, here's some signals that it's learning. If you just started a campaign today and you spent $100 in that campaign and you clicked in there, you would see that this bid strategy is officially learning from $100 and 1 lead or whatever happened. And even if you know a lot of things about that market and your history and stuff, the bid strategy is learning from $100 in spend. If you did the same thing for one of our clients, they could be $100 in, but you can click into that bid strategy and you might see that it's learning and all the bids are set based on over $5 million worth of data. And that is so impactful and so different because even though I might know what works in that market, now the bid strategy actually has data and that bid strategy is going to be significantly smarter. That's one of the reasons that we talked about using conversion focused bid strategies too early, how Google's going to go crazy and bid like all these ridiculous numbers and stuff. We don't actually have that problem because our bid strategy, even though it's brand new in this account, it's been around for a long time. So we can jump right into conversion focused stuff. And it's always, even if your bid strategy has $100,000 worth of data, you would still do better if you had 200,000. And if you had 200, then you'd still do better with 1 million, right? There's no such thing as like too much data to where things
Yeah.
stop working as well. It always makes a difference to have more data. You have anything you would add to that?
I just want to add in one additional thing that makes us different, that's gonna break people's brains. So not only do we use a shared bidding strategy across all of our clients, we actually also share the tracking across all of our clients. And if this is too deep, just stop me, but
It's not too deep, but you're sharing our secrets. So I hope our competitors aren't listening to
I
this,
know,
but
watch out.
continue. Yeah.
They can't replicate this anyway. So basically, just like at the parent account level, there's bidding models that are available. There's a setting where you can set tracking also at the parent level where we build out a kind of an action that can then be applied to all of our accounts. So in practice, how this works is there's a piece of code that has to fire that tells Google that action was taken. And what we do is we use that same code as the code for every single client's tracking. So everyone is using the same conversion action. And so everyone is able to benefit from the volume of the number of times that one action has been taken because, and this is getting really in the weeds, but I promise it'll make sense. There are basically two places where the algorithm's like data is stored. The first one is in the conversion, and then the second one is in the bidding strategy. And we've been able to harness that shared learning across both elements where that learning is stored to compound exponentially the impact of that shared learning. And so it's so powerful to help our clients benefit from that learning across not only the how they bid, but also what they're tracking. And if that doesn't make sense, that's okay. We get it and it drives awesome results. So it's definitely very powerful.
Yeah. I love that. If anybody can't tell, that's definitely Garrett's brainchild that he brought to this company. It totally matters. I think I'm going to try to explain the same thing, but like with different words. So
Please
hopefully
do.
if
That was so jumbled. Please redo it.
No, I think you explained it clearly, but I want to explain it a little bit of a different way. And that way would be that Google's trying to learn what things make it likely for a certain action to happen. But if that action changes, then some of that data doesn't transfer because people have different actions, right? On my website, I could have a newsletter sign up and I could have a demo request or something like that. Let's just say I'm like a SaaS company.
Sure.
And those have different things. If Google learns from what generates the newsletter to then see how do we get the demo request, then it's going to be wrong or the other way around, right? So you have to track different actions. And a lot of the data is stored in that specific action and what generates it. So you could take a campaign with a bid strategy that's really old, that's working super great. Then you just change the conversion action and the results could plummet because the bid strategy is still there. But now you told Google, I'm not tracking that anymore. I'm tracking this new thing. So now in some ways, Google's kind of restarting and is trying to track a different thing. So even if you had a shared bid strategy, if every account has its own thing that it's tracking, then Google's still like the shared strategy would help it learn a little bit faster, but it's still learning a new thing for each individual company. versus if you can tell it, hey, this lead over here in this account is really the same lead that we've been tracking in all those other accounts. It's the same kind of thing. So you can just use your same things you learned from all
Mhm.
those other ones and just apply that here and it's going to work. Then Google doesn't have to start from square one and trying to figure those things out, which means you waste a lot less money in the process. And it also means you get farther faster and farther than you ever would be able to get otherwise. So
Yeah. Now, just to give this some like hard numbers, uh, in the accounts where we've used this tactic, we've dropped down our cost per appointment by about 35% across all of our accounts.
and is that specifically the consolidated conversion actions or the cross account bid strategy or both in combination?
So all of our accounts use the cross account bidding. And so that's a common factor across all of them. But looking at the ones that use cross bidding and cross tracking, and the ones that only use cross bidding, it's about a 35% better cost per appointment with the ones using both. And that's at massive volume. So it's definitely a pretty big sample size and it's been pretty effective.
Yeah, that's super neat. So, like anything that falls into this best category, it's not going to be best practice, right? I'm not aware that you can find any documentation from Google anywhere telling you that this is how things work.
Yeah.
It's like a black box, but people test things and they realize, right? You have enough campaigns where you change the conversion action and then the results go wacky where you realize, maybe it's not just the bid strategy that matters, but it's also the conversion action that holds some data here, right? So, yeah, just so everybody listening knows what you're getting into here, like this is,
This is like some like black box
yeah,
PPC stuff. Yeah.
yes, it's not, you'll never find a book about this, but it does make a big difference. If you can better understand how Google works as a platform than somebody else, then you have a huge advantage in getting results compared to somebody else that just doesn't have the same information that you do. So I hope this was valuable. That's it for today's episode of the Collective Clicks podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time.